Hello and welcome to my channel. Thank you for joining me today. In today's video I'm going to be continuing with drawing the face and the lessons in drawing the face. And so the photograph that I've chosen today looks at first glance to be quite complicated and perhaps a little bit more difficult than some of the photographs we looked at last week. If you didn't see that video, I'll put the link to that up here. But this photograph, although it looks more complicated, it's actually quite simple, and the reason I chose it was because of the shadow. So she's got shadow down the side of her nose here and on her cheek and across here, because the photograph, she's been lit from this side, so that gives us good contrast and makes it a little bit easier to draw the tone. Quite often with these photographs that you get off the internet, like some of those I showed you last week, because they've been using lights and perhaps flashes on the camera, it tends to wash out the subject, and then you lose the contours of the face and the shapes of the face quite easily. In fact, here you nearly lose the line of that edge of the lip there against the cheek, where the flash has obviously hit the cheek, and it's very, very white down this side. So if you were painting it, you would almost be leaving that white. So the first thing, again, like we said last week, is to get the shape of the skull in, and once again we've got actually part of the skull missing. It goes off the page here. You can imagine that that would come much further round. But we're not going to worry about that, we're just going to get in the shape of the face. So I'll start with a forehead, and quite a straight line, and then imagine that going back into the hair. So just put that line there, even though we can't really see it because of the hair. Just continuing, oops, let's get rid of that. Just continue that round. It goes into her eye, because like I spoke about in the video that we did on eyes, you've got that socket there. Then out onto a cheekbone. So if we look here, I'll go from this side and you can see, line that up with that and see how much further in it is. It's slightly further in, then down from there, and this isn't a complete straight line, there's a bit of a wobble there, and it goes out and in again for a chin. And look at the length of this line here from a cheekbone down to a chin compared to the length of that line there. So from a brow bone to there, where her hair starts, is similar to that line there. So you can just check all the time to see that you've got your measurements right. And her chin's actually quite wide and quite flat. So I'm using the Graphitone again so that it shows up for you, but you might want to use something a little bit more delicate than this. So if we look at a neckline, that's coming out about halfway. And this is very hazy. The photographer has used a very soft effect here, so we don't really see where that's hair and where it's shoulder. So we'll perhaps leave that without any detail there. We'll just leave an indication of that. I'm sorry, I just had to answer the door then, so I've actually lost my thread where I was at. Can't remember what I was talking about. But so we've got the basic line of her face in there, and where her neck is, and again if you just measure them, you know, against each other, so once we come to put the nose and things, if we look at where that line comes up to, compare things, you know, the corner of the eye down to the corner of the mouth, corner of the mouth there up to the nose, and then up to the eye, and that's where you'll know whether you've got things right or not. So now we'll just put the line of her hair in. And like I said last week, it's much easier just to put a block of hair in and the basic shape of it, rather than trying to do the whole lot at once. And of course, whoever's looking at this picture isn't necessarily going to have the photograph and know exactly where this girl's hair was going. So if you haven't got it exactly right, it's not a problem, because hair's pretty movable, isn't it? So that's the outline there, and it comes across there, and then obviously her parting's there going back off the page and then down. And if we look, that's pretty much straight down until it goes across here opposite her mouth. So it wants to be going across there and pretty much straight down and then off. And just leave it like that for now, because you can come back later and put all these curls in and all the tones and different lines and things. So here, this shape here where it's flicking over, and similarly here, this often happens where you have a part and you get a little bit of a flick. And to get that shape, if you put the shading in here, that's also going to make a forehead stand out as well. So that's a good little tip, is to get nice and dark in there. So I'm just looking at it here. I think it wants to go a bit further up there. Okay, so now we'll put the eyes in. So like I said last week, they're about halfway down the skull. So just mark where they're going to be very lightly, because you can rub that out later. And then the nostril. Again, it's usually about halfway between the eyes and the chin, and in this case it is. So this lady's got quite a perfect face. So I'm just going to put the nostril in and the shape at this side, and then it goes off. And then the line of a mouth. And actually I'm going to move that nose. I've done exactly what I said last week was easy to do when somebody's on the side. I've left too much space there. So the tip of the nose is really quite close to here. I've made the nose actually way too small. It's more rounded than I've got it, but the actual shape of it we can come back and alter later. So we're not seeing the furthest away nostril. All we're seeing is a bit of shadow above it there on the edge, and where it curls there, and you probably can't see that, and that's changing into shadow there. So I'll just put that line in for the moment, and then we'll come back down to the mouth. And if you look at the corner of the mouth, it's halfway along that line there. So line things up as you go along, and this edge is past the end of the nose there, and it's going down slightly. So again, I talked about this last week. This central line of the mouth gives much more character than drawing in the top lines. There's nothing wrong with drawing in the top lines. You can do. You don't necessarily need to. You can get the shape just with the shadows above and below the mouth. And again, we can refine this later on if we think things are not just quite right. Okay, so now the eyes. So we've put the position in of them. Look carefully at this shape of the open part of the eye there. They're open, they're quite wide. So we go up, across and down. So up, across and down. And you can again soften it off afterwards. And then there's another line where the lid is. And then put the actual eyeball in. So we're seeing the side of the eyeball there. And then where the blue comes to. And she's got quite big pupils. Probably because the flash on the camera's just gone off. So just put the basics in, because we can refine those later on. And just got a little bit of a gap between there and nose, and then the edge of her nose is coming around and straight up to that brow bone. That line sort of carries on from the edge of the nose, and that's where her eyebrow comes in. And don't forget, a lot of ladies, particularly younger ladies, shape their eyebrows so they're not always going to look quite so natural. And then the second eye, so if we look across, that width there is the same as this eye. Don't forget, this eye is going to be bigger because it's closer to us than this one. And again, look from the corner of the eye down to the mouth to see where it begins, and it goes up. And a nice scoop round and down into the hair. And we're seeing much more of the lid as well, because again, this eye is nearer to us, so we're seeing much more of it. I'm hoping that this pencil's showing up to the camera. So if we look across here, now this eyebrow appears higher up, because obviously she's slightly tilted, and again she's moving away from us, and we're not seeing the highest part of this eyebrow, because the highest part of this eyebrow is round the corner from where we're seeing. So we're only seeing the lowest part, which is just above there, of the centre of the nose, up, and again down into the hairline. And again, these have been plucked. This shape might be quite different if it was just natural, so be observant about things like that. Okay, so far I've been quite light with my pencil. Her nose is looking very big, but if you actually double check, if you look at the edge of the nose to the mouth there, the end of the nose to here, end of the nose to that part of the pupil, and there, it is actually right. It's just looking very dominant at the moment because we've not got the rest of the shadow in. So when you haven't got all those shapes, everything else in, you can focus on one area and think it's wrong and start correcting it and realise actually after all you weren't wrong, you had the measurements right, and that you should trust your own measurements. So we've got the very basic shapes in there of her eyes and a nose and a mouth. So now we need to build up the shadow to get the form of a face. So like I said, we want to go behind her face there, because that's really going to bring this out. And this is where I can do it quite quickly. And you hopefully will be taking a lot more time using some smaller pencils, and perhaps altering your pencils, using different ones, starting off with a 2B, HB, and then using some much softer pencils to get some much darker lines. So don't be frightened to go dark behind that eye to make the shape of the face stand out. And I've just gone over a bit too much. So this eraser I use all the time. It's one of the Derwent ones. I do find it quite a handy eraser. So one measurement I have got wrong actually is the hairline here. Can you see her hair comes a bit further over and it's making her face appear a bit too wide there. But we can do that afterwards, bring the hair out a bit more, because it is more or less covering up this edge of her eye here. So these kind of things you just keep, altering as you go along. So all this side of her face more or less is in shadow. You might not want it as scribbly as this. You might want to use your finger to blend that a little bit better. And then again, like I said before, the eye sockets cast a shadow themselves. So you're nearly always going to have light up from above that's going to end up casting a shadow in there. So look carefully where the highlights are, and you're going to leave that white paper. But of course, if you miss some of the highlights, you can always come back. If you're using a white paper, you can get them back quite easily with your eraser later on. So like I said earlier, all down the side of this nose is in shadow, and around the corner here. But within your shadows, it's not just one colour, it's not just one tone rather. There's a few different tones in there. So it's a case of very gradually building it up and building it up and looking at where the darkest tones are, where your mid-tones are and your highlights, and softening it off at the edges and letting those shadows just blend out quite nicely. So we're not seeing that nostril, but we are seeing the edge there. So even though this is quite a blunt pencil, it's not got much of a point on it, you can still use it both on its side to get the shadows and on its end to get a little bit more detail. And this is where you can start and build things up. So look at those eyelashes going out. Obviously they're quite a bit darker. It's dark behind here. And just keep going, looking at your darks and your lights and reinforcing some of those shapes and correcting as you go along. Again, there's eyelashes on the bottom lid. You can't really distinguish that they're eyelashes from this distance, but you can see that it's darker there. And you can see a couple of little lines here where the eyelid is folded over. So again, as I say in all my videos, the level of detail that you put in is entirely down to you. There's a little bit of shadow here again, that's thinking about that eye socket and the shape that the eye socket's making. And there would be more shadow up here normally if it wasn't for the fact that she's probably been photographed with a flash. So within this shadow we've put a basic shadow over, but now if you look where it's actually darker, and that's going to make that shape of the nose more. And under here. So I think I'll just carry on now with the tone and the shadow. I don't think there's much else I can tell you about it. I wouldn't probably do every last hair on this. I'd just get some basic shapes and put some shadow in to make some nice big curls. She's got some lovely curls, so we want to get some of those in. Like I say, go nice and dark behind her face to make her face pop forward. Look at the cast shadows here and underneath here, which is going to make her lips and her nose more 3D, because of course she's not flat, her face isn't flat, you need to bring that out a bit more. I'm just looking at this now, I think maybe just shave a little touch off the edge of her nose there. It's very, very difficult to see with it being light, and I will put the reference photograph link down below, so if you want to have a go at the same photograph following these sort of basic rules. So like we said last week, you've got your eyes more or less halfway down the skull, your nostrils halfway between the eye line and the chin, and then the centre of your mouth between those. But everybody's different, so always check and always line things up against each other. Okay, so I'll carry on now. If you have any questions, if you want to put those in the comments below, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. Otherwise, enjoy your drawing, have a go. That reference photo link will be there in the description below. So thanks for watching, and I'll carry on with this, and bye for now.